Our next guest needs no introduction. Her name is Ambassador Koki Muli. She is a governance, democracy, and elections expert, and she'll explain to us the expertise in all these areas. Ambassador, karibu sana, welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much, Eric, for having me.
We call that the hot seat, but for friends of ours like yours,
I better be careful then.
we just warm it up, right?
Yes.
You are warmly dressed, so
Thank you.
when we warm it up for you, you'll be very comfortable. It's a cold day in Nairobi today, you know. Ambassador, you have done a lot of work on matters of elections and governance from the early 90s throughout into the next century, to the first decade, and now the second decade of this century. What have you been doing lately? Let's start with lately, and then we'll go back.
Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you for the question. I have been working at the Southeastern Kenya University at the main campus, which is at Kwavonza in Kitui County. We are actually we are located between 5,000 acres in Machakos and 5,000 acres in Kitui. So we are on the borderline of the two counties. But we are sitting on the side of Kitui.
You're on the Kitui side.
We are on the Kitui side. But the other side of the main campus is actually on the Machakos side.
Right. And you started this last year.
Yes, I started in 2011.
Okay.
That's where I was appointed as ambassador from. And then I went in towards end of 2012. And I came back last year and I reported back to the university. When you leave university, you take leave to serve your government. When you come back, you report almost the same day and you start work.
You continue.
So yes, but when I came back, there was COVID, so we were working off campus online.
Where did your ambassadorial journey take you?
To New York, at the Kenya mission to the United Nations. That's where I was working for quite some time, representing our interests and trying to put Kenya on the map.
This is about how many? 6 years or so?
6 years and a half, almost 6 years, almost 7 years. Let's say yes.
Okay. And this is during the time when we were talking about the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes, that's right.
And Kenya was heading this particular one, and Ambassador Macharia Kamau was
was a co-facilitator. was a co-facilitator of the committee, the group, and then the co-chair. So actually, if I may say, we can take a lot of credit as a country that those Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 of them and the very many targets, were actually negotiated under our watch. Right. And it gives us a lot of pride as a country that Kenya and Hungary were able to design this. And then subsequently, Kamau was also elected or, appointed by the President of the General Assembly to carry forward the agenda after designing the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. At that time and this time, Kenya has really done a great service to the universe. And because the Sustainable Development Goals took over from the Millennium Development Goals, which were not really universal and which were, there was a lot of unfinished business. So that business was taken over by the SDGs. And we believe by 2030, we shall be able to have made a lot of traction in this area of development. And also by trying to end inequalities in a city, in country to country, within countries and so on. Because inequalities is a big problem for all of us.
If I may ask, what would you say was a general framework from which you determined these goals as being A, the fundamental goals, and also sustainable?
Okay, that's Very nice question. As I warned you, I have to be careful how to pronounce Munga.
I want to give you full permission
CT.
To massacre
to
the name.
step on it as you see fit. So long as there's a mu to it, we are good. And there's an A somewhere,
It ends with a GA.
we are good. Yes.
So, you know, the framework of the United Nations is based on the issue of peace and security and development, sustainable development. And the issue of sustainable development is very critical because, as we say, it is not possible to have peace without development, and you can't have development without peace. And the issue of environment, which is the third arm of this conversation, is we used to say, and we say it up to today, that climate change is actually an emergency. So you cannot work within a framework of development of peace and security without environment. I'm trying to create the anchors around this sustainable development goals. So having said that, the framework exists in the UN Charter. In addition to that, we have the priorities of humans, you know, the needs, the basic needs, the issues of poverty, the issues of hunger, the issues of underdevelopment, the issues of inequality. And I know this conversation is a very important conversation around eradicating disease. And we used to have this at independence. You remember the different frameworks of kumaliza umaskini na disease. And so it is the same in many, many countries. And even developed countries have serious inequalities and poverty within their own countries. So that is the framework. And to make it sustainable, because we looked, you have to, in order for you to determine the present and the future, you have to look at the past. And therefore, we looked at the MDGs. And so the Millennium Development Goals were made only for developing countries. And they were not inclusive in the sense that they were determined by a group of people somewhere. People say somewhere in the basement of the UN headquarters, and then they came up and said to Africans and Asians and developing countries, go implement those and you will be okay.
Right.
So what we did, we said that, and the Sustainable Development Goals came from the Rio conference in Rio de Janeiro. And from there, a report called I was going to say the Kenya we want. No, but it's not the Kenya we want, but something similar to that. It is from that document that had determined the specific framework of how we will, all the 193 countries, members of United Nations, will now, all of them, sit down and negotiate the development goals that will take over from the Millennium Development Goals. And we said we have to make them sustainable, because sustainability is critical, not just for environment, but also for development, for peace. If you have something and you cannot sustain it, it will finish. Right. So we are thinking if we must have development, it must be sustainable, and we have to make it the new norm. And we have to protect the environment and make it also sustainable and so on. And we have to have peace and make it sustainable. Right. So it is on that frame of mind that we are looking at, let's look at how to end hunger. Kabisa. Sio ati some, but kabisa.
Eradicate.
So you are thinking on the broader future, you know, the bigger picture.
Right.
And you set yourself a very ambitious agenda to make sure that you want to know where you are going. You try as much as you want and see what you can do up to 2030. Then at 2030, you will evaluate and say, we were able to achieve this amount of progress in development.
And these are the lessons
we were
we
able
learned.
to achieve this amount of progress in peace. We were able to achieve this amount of progress in mitigating climate change and creating an environment that is sustainable, reducing the degrees, our emissions to the air and the degrees in temperature.
Right.
Yes.
Ambassador,
Ambassador, let me, sorry, I just want us to get into because what we're doing is introducing you to our audience of the work that you've done, to the crux of the matter now on issues of elections and democracy. You've worked in this field for a while. You are among the people who worked on the South Sudan referendum that then led to their independence. But before that, also in the country, you participated in lawmaking for our elections and reforming our electoral system. That's a lot of work that you've done there. Maybe you can just give us a bit of the work you've done on matters of elections and democracy and democratizing this country in particular.
Thank you very much. When you speak like that, you make me sound older than Munga.
How dare you? What
Anyway.
on earth is wrong with this man?
Paul, City.
No, thank you very
You're
much.
still the oldest in the room.
Yes. No, I'm distinctly.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Eric Lati, for those very kind words. I see that I was very fortunate to be in a situation where there was necessity for my participation in the processes that you speak. I started the business of elections actually, I don't know, accidentally. The late Reverend Gadaka called me, I think it was 1990. I was actually just a fresh graduate, but I started just before I graduated in 89. And I remember Gadaka, he was working then at, I think, the ecumenical movement. And he was telling me we need to go to somewhere, some place in Central and do civic education. So I asked him, what is that? Those days, I mean, who knew civic education? 31, 32 years ago.
No one did.
And so we are thinking, okay, civic education, that is so progressive. He sounded so clever. So he said that, first we start by educating people because, as you know, we are in transition. We are hoping that we will be able, this is 1990. We are hoping that by next year, before the next election, we are going to have multi-party. I said, really, you think? and he said, yes. So I said, okay, why not? So I went and we had a lot of battles with the police. We were chased from the place where we were going, so we moved from venue to venue. Eventually, we went to a church place. And we started telling people about what is in the Katiba, how they can participate in registering themselves as voters, how they can fundamentally change the political landscape of the country, how they can, become voters, how they can present themselves. And a lot of people actually thought we were out of our minds. I mean, how? Those were Kano days. And you are telling people that you can make a difference in Kenya.
You can change the government.
And so that's how I started. So, I mean, fast forward to 1990 and Nelson Mandela is released. And so a lot of conversation around elections and freedom and so on. And there's a good feeling that things can become good in Africa. So this wave of liberty and potential and possibilities. So we start in earnest. We start this business of civic education. I actually begin to enjoy this business of teaching and moving from one location to another and evading police and so on. It was actually quite exciting. I was young and I was lovely and happy and, moving, ahead with this and trying to make a difference in Kenya and learning from other countries as well in Africa and abroad and thinking, what was happening in Yugoslavia and all those countries and thinking, wow, this is possible. So I joined, after graduation, I actually went away to Canada on an exchange program, and I was working at the Ombudsman's office in British Columbia. And when I came back to Kenya, I was so re-energized, and I thought, wow, there are so many things we can do, and we don't have time. We were young and excitable and thinking, we can change Kenya. So the first thing I did was actually had the audacity of placing a call to the Attorney General and Amos Wako then, and I told him, the Attorney General Emeritus, I told him, I think we can create the office of the Ombudsman in Kenya. And he says, oh, that's excellent. Why don't you seek an appointment with my secretary and come and tell me all about it? And I did. Anyway, the rest you can see that is what planted the seed for the administrative of justice and so on. It's exciting. Right. So anyway, after that I joined Gitobi Manyara as an assistant editor in Nairobi Law Monthly. And it was very interesting because our business was covering politics, and that's how I was introduced to this business of elections, business of politics, and I was given an opportunity to interview the late Jaramogi Oginga during that city stadium event that happened, and in preparation to 1992 elections.
So, Ambassador, even from then, it could be said that whether it was in thought or deed, that you were a disruptor, that the idea that something different to yield a different result, right, had started even then. So even today, when we're talking about that, your vote in terms of something that you can do to bring about a different result, you already started to think about it, a while ago. Yes. That you don't have to go with the status quo. And if you're looking for a different kind of result in the way things are being done in the country, developmentally, government, leadership-wise, legislatively, that you can change that by the way you think and then how you act.
Exactly. And you can change it, not they. And so instead of complaining, you can actually do it yourself. And actually, you can make a difference. Everybody can make a difference. I know I've contributed a little. And if all of us contribute a little, we get somewhere. I try to call myself not a disruptor, if you like, but I like that. I'll use that in the future. Yeah. But I like to say that I don't want to sleep during a revolution. And every day there is something that is changing. And you just have to lift your legs and feel the ground. And you will see. For example, I keep on telling people that there is so much progress that has been made in the political and electoral environment. Right now, we have so much enabling legal and institutional framework. We didn't have enabling laws in the 90s and before this Katiba, but progressively. In 92, we changed in 91, 92, we had 92 election, we reintroduced multipartism and then also limited the terms for the president to 2 terms and introduced broader participation in the Electoral Commission of Kenya and also participation of other political parties. This is something new. In 97, it was even better because the Electoral Commission membership was broadened to include those 10 from political parties in Parliament. And then in 2002, we had a mini revolution where we had, we had a peaceful transition from an existing ruling party for many years that is replaced by a new opposition party, which was a coalition. So we were on the right track. And then, of course, the level of information and awareness that came out of the Bomas constitutional process, the civic education, the participation of Kenyans and everyone else has actually enhanced the awareness of people so that you cannot say Kenyans are politically docile. But there was a time that you would walk into a church or a mosque or a place and talk about politics and people want to, stone you or tell you, sisi hatutaki hiyo maneno.
They don't want to engage.
No, absolutely.
There's more engagement now. Let's take a break at this point. 29 minutes after 8, having a conversation with Ambassador Koki Muli. She is an expert on governance, democracy, and elections. She's been giving us, the work that she's done in the trenches. The revolution will not be televised. You have to be awake and participate in it and watch it yourself. And she's saying, well, each of us has the ability to make a change. That's a conversation that we're having today. What is your power as a voter as we're gearing to the next general election? This is Kenya's biggest conversation on SpiceFM, online and on KTN Home. We'll be back shortly. Ambassador, earlier this week, when IEBC launched the mass voter registration exercise, we had a conversation in this room, and we were asking ourselves, so they are targeting a huge population of people who just turned 18 between 2017 and this year. And in fact, Nadia just reminded us, it's about 4 million people between the ages of 18 and 20. Another 2 million people or so between that the other age bracket. Now, these are people who have not registered to vote. These are people who have never participated in voting. And it's very good that you tell us your first engagement in politics was doing civic education. What's the difference between civic education and voter education? Is there such a difference? Which of them tells the voter how they tick the ballot, and which one tells the voter the power of the ballot?
Thank you very much, Eric. I should start by saying that indeed the number of unregistered voters is not just limited to that age bracket. It is also true that there are a lot of other older people who don't engage in elections and they don't vote. I was shocked to find some older people in my business when I was the executive director of the Institute for Education in Democracy, talking with adults in key government positions, and they don't have a voter's card. And I was thinking, how can you possibly sit there and attempt to make decisions on behalf of Kenya and you don't vote? Anyway, there are a lot of that category of people, but we usually target that category that the CAS talked about. And it is something that can be done, because I remember in 2005, between 2005 and 2007, the Institute for Education in Democracy, where I was working, got together with True Black and Ridiculous, and we worked in collaboration with the Electoral Commission and managed to register altogether, that period, almost 6 million voters. So it is possible. And when you target people we had a very big campaign. You remember Vijana Tugutuke Nitamu Yako campaign? I was actually leading that campaign as executive director of the Institute for Education in Democracy. And essentially, one thing we must remember is that although voter registration is a continuous responsibility of IEBC, it's not always done in this massive way throughout. So they have, like now they have from 4th of October, I think, to 4th of November, this huge campaign reaching out to people to vote, targeting certain categories on demographics. But remember, to be registered as a voter, you have to be eligible. Eligibility requires, it's not just because you are 18. You must have an identity card.
Yep.
And you know how complicated that is. And a lot of that target group do not have ID cards. And I know how hard it is, because I had to literally, struggle to get, to work with my children to get them ID cards. It's very difficult to get those documents. So
Is it still difficult to get an ID card?
It is difficult to get an ID card. It takes a long time. I mean, it's, it depends on where you are in Kenya. In some regions, you have to have your parents' documents and to be able to ascertain, because ID card, a national ID card, confers to a person citizenship. You are a citizen, so...
Ambassador, I'm conflicted when on things like this, because we're talking about one thing that requires another thing in order to happen.
Exactly.
And the supposition is that the state would enhance this, that more and more people having reached that age where they need this, that it would be a seamless operation.
You would think so.
Right.
Well, getting an ID card or getting a voter's card, now you don't get voter's card, you just get a slip. It's not mandatory. There are things that you do for yourself. You go out and do it. Nobody forces you to get an ID card. They encourage you by saying that you can't have an M-Pesa thing without, you cannot do certain things.
You're indirectly forced.
Indirectly
you
forced.
will not transact.
But the point is, because it is voluntary, it means, and that's why, in some countries where registering as a voter and voting is mandatory, it actually makes a lot of sense, although that's a different conversation. But if the facilitation, that's why you have Huduma centers and you have all sorts of support and facilitation from government. But I think there is a lot that can be done. I remember when Kivuitu was the chairman of Electoral Commission of Kenya, there was an initiative between the institute where I was working, ECK, and a number of other government bodies to try to persuade the government, especially the registrar of births and deaths, the registrar of persons, the Electoral Commission, NSSF, and all those groups in government that require registers of Kenyans to work together, where we have one seamless register. When you are born, you are registered at birth. When you turn 18, something automatically, and in many countries that happens, automatically changes your status from youth to, from a child to adult, and then some information is sent to you on the address that you have given to your state to tell you that now, please know your status has changed and we require ABCD for you to like biometrics. We require your biometrics to transition you to adulthood, where you get an ID card. And then from there, you don't require anything else to vote and to do anything. That one is sufficient to give you the authority to be able to vote, because you are over 18, which means if you have that one serial number from birth to death, it means, and then when you die, you are struck off from the register. It means that you will never have dead people voting, as we have seen in the past.
Or receiving an SSF.
Exactly. And so that is a political minefield, because there are different bodies and agencies in government that, had this conversation, and the conversation has been going on for decades. And I do not know why we don't have one document that enables you to access all the government services in Kenya, and why you don't have one number that identifies you as a citizen all throughout. And of course, they will say a lot of things, because a lot of things have been said, and I don't want to go to that conversation, but I can say that would make the process of seamless registration easier. And it will also save billions of money, because if that existed, this business of the awareness mass registration, the registration business should be in one central government department, and registration for everything. People should focus on their business, their core business, like IEBC should focus on the core business of conducting elections and referenda. They shouldn't be in the business of registering citizens to vote. That should be the business of those people either issuing cards or that body I'm talking about. And it would actually save government lots of money. And therefore, if we had that, then it would be, we would not have this conversation about Nendeni Muka register and so on. It would be, please come and vote. Because now, persuading people also to come out and vote and engaging people, it requires sort of recalibrating our mindset and sort of I don't know, to use Goge's words, Goge Wathiongo's words, decolonizing our mind from the mindset of Kitambo.
But
I
must say there's something very strange here when it comes to this issue of registration, the issue of the issuance of IDs and even registration so that you can get an ID. I happen to have, not the latest generation of ID, but from the rather huge one to a smaller one, which looks like a debit card, okay? I remember getting that new ID, and the thing that I found particularly interesting, because I got it in Migori. I had all my details, but the chief who helped me get that ID told me there's something he also finds strange. Because in his office, there were very many boxes of IDs that had not been collected.
Exactly. And that is something that we have, when I was at IED, we tried to understand. I must say that we introduced this auditing of the voters register and auditing of registers. And one of the things that the Vijana Tugutuke campaign did was to reach out to the young people and tell them, where is your national identity card? And somebody would say, oh, yes, I registered, because at the time we wanted, like in schools, like some people go to register for ID cards when they need something, then they need a particular service. And then something happens and they don't need it anymore. So they forget, and that ID comes to the chiefs or to the DO's place or whichever other place, the collection centers. That's number one. But number two, there are people who register who apply, and they are given this provisional paper, and they use it for one or two things, and they think it is enough. And their IDs sit in the chief's camp. But then there are all those people who register, and they go forever to try every time they travel, and they are traveling from long distance, and that is what Huduma centers were trying to cure, this traveling and so on, and trying to bring all the services together. So they travel all back and forth, and they come from long distances, and so they give up, and so their cards are there. And others lose cards. Yeah. You have seen in windows in shops and other places, people's cards. I mean, IDs. An ID is such an important card,
Those boxes were not few.
They were not few.
No.
But those people, many
of those people...
And
that was in the chief's office or a DO's office?
It was the chief's office.
It was a chief's office.
Yes.
So he's dealing with an entire location.
Yes.
But the chief, when he gets those cards, what does he do? He keeps quiet with them.
Does he go out to say, I have received cards?
What he does in his baraza, he says, I have cards. Please come to my office so that you can collect your card. He is not going to read a list of names. But one of the things he said was this. There are many people who don't want an ID card because it actually identifies them. They don't want to be identified.
They don't want to be known.
They want to be anonymous.
Hence civic education and voter education. And I've not told you the difference yet. I'm remembering your question. Don't worry.
Tell him the difference.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, civic education comes from the word civics, and from the word civic meaning that everyone, like a child of 10 years, a child of 12 years, and everyone from 0 to 100 or whatever the life expectancy is. That is civic education. And civic education can be about mental health. It can be about political participation. It can be about participation in constitution making. It can be about farming. It can be about all sorts of subjects. It's not limited to the electoral process and to elections. It can be on everything. So including also elections. But voter education targets that person called voter. That's why it's called voter. And to be a voter, you have to be eligible. You have to be a Kenyan citizen, you have to be 18 years, you have to have an ID card, you have to be unjudged bankrupt, you have to be sane, not of unsound mind, and all sorts of disqualifications, some of them really and that's another conversation. But you have to qualify to be a voter. And therefore, it targets somebody who is 18 years and above, who is a potential voter, because it also targets those 6 million that we are talking about that have not registered, but they are called potential voters. And therefore, it will focus on the specific processes in the electoral cycle and activities in the electoral cycle, or the processes in the electoral process. For example, registration, it will target people for specific campaigns, such as not having violence and intimidation.
Right.
You know, this voter education,
General
to register
conduct in
an election,
Okay.
political participation in a political party, and related issues that a voter needs to know, and including delimitation of boundaries and what kind of things we can do.
Does it include the subjective? The subjective in terms of duty, responsibility, patriotism, and things like that. Does this education include, you know, the sacredness of the vote, the responsibility that you have to the nation when it then comes to lending your vote and not giving it away as your birthright for a few shillings?
You would wish, don't you?
I'm being very aspirational.
You see, in this country, and I must take blame in the sense that I have been involved in both civic and voter education for decades in Kenya and outside Kenya. And one of the biggest problems is that because it is almost urgent to focus on the immediate things, like the campaign like this one is not going to tell you your responsibility as a citizen, what it means. We leave this kind of education to the education system, where we used to, when I was younger, we used to have civics in schools. I don't know if they do that now, but there are categories of the education system that is supposed to teach you about how to be a patriot, how to love your country. How to love your country is not just what you do and say. It is really must be ingrained in yourself that this is and if you love your country, it means you love it all, not just your tribal and ethnic cocoons, but you know, and it is important responsibilities of a citizen. What are those responsibilities of a citizen? What are the national values that we have in the Constitution? In Article 10, you tell people from childhood until you are grown up, so that then when you register as a voter, I'm going to vote for Eric Latif because he not only resonates with what I believe in, we share values, but he's also advancing my interest and the agenda that I'm interested in, irrespective of where he comes from.
Talking of duties, the ambassador will not speak about this. I will speak about it. One of the things that the ambassador did that many Kenyans may not know, they take it for granted that we have a seat in the Security Council. But she played a very key role in our getting that seat. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I must say, it was a tiny contribution, like everybody was. I mean, it takes a lot of leadership and from the top to be able to get into the Security Council and to persuade other member states, because you persuade not just the 54 from Africa, but you also persuade the 193, including the 54 from Africa. But once you get that kind of endorsement from Africa, which we didn't have, remember we had a problem with Djibouti.
Yes, we did.
Anyway, thank you. Let me just not say, but I am very proud. In fact, we were elected like today, I think the 18th. And on the 19th of June, I got into the plane and left because I was so happy with that. And I say, among it, well, I can say in my tiny contribution towards that, it made me proud to be Kenyan. And although, and I must use this opportunity to say, although a lot of people think that I am not a Kenyan because I am married to a Frenchman, I have never taken French citizenship, and I cannot be American. I served my country as a patriot, and I consider myself a lot more Kenyan than very many unconscious Kenyans. I am conscious to the fact that I am not just a Kenyan, a patriot, but that the responsibility of me as a citizen is paramount. And everything I do in my life is actually takes that into consideration. So just to debunk the myth that I may be American, French, or whatever. Not that I wouldn't mind, but over these years, and actually next week, I'm celebrating 25 years of marriage. So I must say, I mean, in those 25 years of marriage, I never felt the need to apply to be anything else but Kenyan. I am proud to be a Kenyan. So, and that's why I have been doing this, this work of trying to get other people to wake up to being Kenyan, because I believe that does help us achieve what we are talking about. And when you tell a young person, go out and vote, my daughter was telling me, because I was telling her now, since you are back in the country, we have to take you, and you have to get you have to register yourself as a voter. And she said, no, we're having a conversation about what will happen if we register, and what if we have people in the ballot paper we don't like. I told her two things. One, you may not like whoever is in the ballot paper, but we have to check the one that is closest to talks to you in terms of values, in terms of agenda, and so on. I told her one day, jokingly, and I must have mentioned this to Eric Latif at another conversation, is that I wish we had a ballot paper that had all the names of people and a box written, none of the above. And then say that if more than 50% of voters vote none of the above, that election is repeated with different candidates. Yes, that's what I told my daughter. And I told her, until then, you have to take your vote. You have to go out and vote to the best person ever. And if
don't look for the next best.
Next best, you know what I'm saying?
Not there, go for the next best.
Go for the next, but vote, because when you go out and vote, it means, especially young people, and that's why I'm happy with the campaigns that are happening in social media, and I understand. Like, for example, I was telling someone, look at why everyone is going to Mount Kenya. They have over 5 million votes. And politicians who want to be elected, they want numbers.
Yep.
So they will go where the votes are. Why don't we have Kenyans from all the regions of Kenya getting more than 5 million voters registered? Then Mount Kenya and others, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, they'll become irrelevant. Because you can go to your own village to get votes. You can go to everywhere in Kenya. So if we can end voter suppression, if we can end this problem of ID cards, and we get as many Kenyans register everywhere in Kenya, then all of us become relevant. And every politician who wants a vote nationally must be elected by all of us. Because if you go to Western and you have 4.8 million registered voters, you have 5 million in Central, and you have 6 million in Coast, and 3 million in Eastern, then it means that you will not just need to go to Mount Kenya. You will need to go to the Coast, you need to go to Western, you need to get all those votes. And we can say, with certainty that if I am going to seek for national position as a president, right now we can say that you will, it's the deputy president is likely to come from the place with the highest number of votes for obvious reasons. But in a situation like I'm saying, it will not matter. The deputy president will come from the best, because in fact, all those people will have a stake, and it will not be possible to just say Mount Kenya tupatie hii na hii. And the promises, the promises of development
will be many.
and the agenda is going to be focusing on the actual development agenda of
Ambassador
the
Koki
country.
Muli, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
You will come again. As we get towards 2022, come back. Let's talk about the voter. Let's educate people. Do the thing that you've been doing for the last 30 years
Thank
on
you.
this platform. Let's educate voters on duties, responsibilities, and most importantly, the power.